So thanks for joining. Thanks for jumping on, everybody. This meeting is going to be recorded so that we can post it later. So if you don't want your face shown in the video, then you probably want to turn your camera off at this time. Also, if you don't mind muting your microphone until, unless you're speaking, so that we don't get the feedback bouncing around here. Our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, April 20th. And we're going to have Chris Stanley, who a lot of you guys know is going to be our guest. Chris went from 0 to 50 plus units pretty quickly, and he has a pretty interesting story. So he's going to be sharing his story with us next month. So that'll be awesome to hear. Also, we have, we're going to see if anyone has any announcements that they want to throw out to the group. And I would start with an announcement that I don't know, there was a post about it in the Facebook group, but City Council did pass an ordinance here in the last week or so to make it illegal to discriminate against source of income. So essentially what that means is, from their perspective, you are not, able to just flat out say, no Section 8, because that's considered a source of income. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that rolls out, and what their enforcement, is. And but that's something that those of you who own rentals and do leasing on your own should probably be aware of, and might want to check into that ordinance to get the details. And we can put a link in the chat box there to check it out so that you can read that first person for yourself. Mark, did you want to share your announcement as well about the basis points?
Yes, I will, but I'll do a quick add to that Columbus change there for the Section 8. The repercussions on this is you will see rental rates go up. That's what will happen. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to tell you why. If you want to ask me why, ask me later. But I will talk about mortgage rates. So I put out a post over the weekend, and I plan to put together a more in-depth video that I'll post onto the Coin Facebook page. But basically, Fannie and Freddie are still under conservatorship from the government from the last housing crisis. And with that, the government gets to go in and tell them some things they want them to do or not do sometimes. And what they came out on Wednesday night is they said, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, we don't want your total lending portfolio to be more than 7% of investment properties and second homes. So if you think about it, if they have 100 loans in their portfolio, the government said we want your total portfolio not to be more than 7% of those should be investment properties and second homes. Well, guess what? They're getting close to that number. Now it's always changing all the time because they're always adding more loans, but they have to kind of stay within that number. So to slow down that business, what they have done is added a 200 basis point delivery fee. Now, this is kind of something like we had last year when there was a 50 basis point added fee for all refinances. Now, this doesn't necessarily go directly to the consumer. It hits the lender, but then us as a lender, we pass it on to the consumer. Okay. Now, what does 200 basis points mean to you? 200 basis points means about 1% increase in interest rate. That's what that means. And for some other products, even more. So if you're doing like cash out refinance on a 4-unit, it might even be more than that. Okay. Now, for a second home, I can't remember, but I think it was only 100 basis points on second home. So those went up about 0.5% on that rate. Now, any of you that have a refinance or a purchase that has already been locked, you are fine. There is no, you're locked, you're good with your lender. Your lender is the one who's not going to, they're going to have to incur that delivery fee. You are fine, because this goes into effect, by the way, April 1st. So there's no chance, I have loans that I'm closing right now. There's no way I can get that loan delivered to Fannie Mae in time and avoid that 200 basis point delivery fee. Okay. So it's not my customer's fault. It's just on me. It's part of doing business. It's like flipping a house and all of a sudden your cost came in too high at the end and you lost some money. That's basically what's happening. Now, if you are though in the business of buying properties, and you haven't locked anything, whoever your lender is out there, whoever you do business with, make sure you get with them, find out what things are going on, because I guarantee you your rates and what your expectations are going to be different. So if you're burying a property and you're working up your numbers based off of what you think rates are going to be, they're different now. So you need to rework your numbers. All right. So like I said, I'll put together a video as soon as I can, a little bit more detail maybe, and try to get it out there for everyone to check on it. But if you want to contact me, or just contact whoever your lender is, and I'm sure they can help you out with that information.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. And Amanda threw the link for the Columbus Dispatch article about the new Columbus, the City Council ordinance in the chat box. So check it out there. Does anyone else have any, if anyone else has any other announcements they want to throw out there to the group, this would be a great time. Going once.
I just have a quick question. What if you say yes to Section 8 and then the inspectors come and they find something you don't like? Are we going to be forced to fix that to their satisfaction?
Typically, I mean, if your property fails the Section 8 inspection, then they just aren't willing to sign a contract with you. So I don't, you know, that they're gonna. They don't force you to, you know, they just have their standard. If you don't meet their standard, then yeah, I don't know what they're going to do there.
I know.
Okay, we've had some pleasant experience with them and some less than pleasant.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have some questions about how they'd be able to handle a volume increase, but we'll see what happens there.
Well, the challenge is that what they're really doing is making CMHA of the protected class. They call it source of income, but I've been in a lot of these meetings. I wrote 2 letters. In fact, one of them was reviewed by a national housing advocate named Roger Valdez, who's based out in Seattle. I've been involved with a lot of other investors with this matter, and it's going to create a lot of problems. It's going to create a lot of problems that they're not intending to create, because I deal with a lot of, the biggest part of my portfolio is affordable housing, and I like that segment, but I do not take Section 8 tenants, not because I don't like the tenants. Most of the tenants that I've got, I've probably had a dozen over the years that I've inherited from properties that I purchased, and the tenants have been great, but CMHA is a nightmare to work with. And we've had situations where, you know, inspections took 2 or 3 weeks. I have a lot of friends who are property managers that have had like 5 and 6 weeks, 7-week delays that they're not getting paid rent for on inspections. And I think ultimately this is probably going to be challenged in the courts, but with government's intention to do, you know, the quote unquote right thing to help one group, they are seriously impeding another group. And again, I think what's going to happen is that rents are going to go up beyond what Section 8 will be willing to pay. And there will probably be a number of tenants, because I deal mostly, my market is mostly other housing providers. And most of the properties I buy, I try not to buy 1 or 2 at a time. I like buying 3 or 4 or 5 at a time just because of economies of scale. And the people I've been talking to lately are very concerned, not just about the housing or the eviction moratorium, which has again been extended, but because now the government's forcing us to do business with the government. That's what CMHA is. It's a government entity. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But I think what ultimately is going to happen is there's probably at some point going to be a class action to dispute some of the challenges and things that are going on. And I even think, I know Mark is sort of hedging what he doesn't want to say anything, but I think common sense will dictate that rents are going to go up beyond what Section 8 will pay, and there will probably be people doing things to the properties that they know won't get approved through Section 8. So I'm not advocating that you should do either of those things, but this is a very, very problematic issue. And along with that legislation, if you guys want to look it up, you can do it. It's called Housing for All. And if anybody wants to private message me, I can email you those documents. The even more disturbing part of this is the renter's choice security deposit option that they give to residents, where if they elect, they can not pay a security deposit and instead get a security deposit insurance policy. You heard that correctly. An insurance policy that is designed to guarantee their security deposit in the event that they get evicted or they cause damages to the property. That's a nightmare in and of itself. But this legislation was very, very bad for housing providers. And I see that probably the only option that we're going to have to deal with this in the long term is probably do some kind of class action to rectify it, because it's very biased, it's very prejudiced against housing providers, and it's going to cause a lot of landlords and housing providers that were already on the fence about whether they wanted to stay in business because housing prices are so high, even in the bottoms, the hilltop, north, south, east, Linden. I'm seeing six-figure prices in all of these traditionally affordable housing neighborhoods. And I think you're going to see a lot of landlords and housing providers cash out and sell them to owner occupants. And it's going to have probably the reverse intended effect. But I've been very involved for the last 4 weeks with this. And I can't say how disappointed I really am about it.
Thanks. That is, yeah, it's definitely there's gonna be some ripples, and it is nice to hear that you were involved. I sent a couple letters and got the, thanks for your input reply, basically, but we'll see how it shakes out. That's boy, that could be a whole topic there in itself, but we'll keep rolling here. Amanda wanted to do a quick market update, and then we'll continue on.
Well, if you've been coming to the meetings the past few months, the market's pretty much the same as what it has been, which is absolutely kind of crazy. And January 2021, the last Columbus Realtors official sales report showed that the average sale price in January 2021 was 15% higher than January 2020. So even though, overall 2020 ended about 10% higher than the year before, actually January was a little higher than that, 15% on average. I looked at, like, right now we just have a little over 1,200 single family and condos, so residential properties listed on the market. About 900 of those are single family and about 250 are condos. If we look at just Franklin County alone, there's just 569 residential listings, and only 375 of those are single family homes. So right now in Franklin County, only 375 homes for sale, which is extremely low. We have very, very low inventory. The average sale price of a home, so if we look at just January 1st through March 15th, the average sale price of a single family home is a little over $275,000, with the median around $240,000. So prices continue to rise. Anytime you got low inventory, high demand, the prices just keep going up. If a new listing is priced well when it's on the market, you're most likely going to have showings for 2 days, have 15 to 25 offers to choose from, and they're all going to be very aggressive. So it really is, it's never been kind of a better time in the history of real estate in Central Ohio to sell a property. But it's still also a good time to buy since interest rates are historically low. So that's what's keeping the demand very strong. There is one event coming up actually in 2 days that I thought people might be interested in. It's put together by Ohio X, which is a nonprofit statewide technology and innovation partnership that is kind of passionate about helping to make Ohio a leading tech hub. And so it's all about real estate and kind of the future of real estate and technology in Ohio. So that event is March 18th at 12 p.m. And I do have a link for more info, so I'll put that in the chat. That's all I had for this month market update. I know we're excited to move on and hear about our main topic.
All right, and before we jump into that, we are gonna take a moment to do our member spotlight, which normally Nick Carricane would be handling, but they are traveling right now and a little bit off the grid. And so I'm gonna jump in and introduce our member spotlight this month, which is Steve Shu. And Steve is been hanging around Coin for quite some time, and also part of the Left Field Investors Group, co-founder there with our own our own founder here, Jim Pfeiffer. And Steve here, he's an ophthalmologist in Westerville with a private practice. He's got a wife and 3 young adult children. got a podcast for patient education called Healthy Eyes 101. That's Healthy Eyes 101. Check it out. Also, as I said, a co-founder of Left Field Investors, which is a networking group geared towards passive investors. If you haven't checked that one out, that's a great group. A lot of information shared there, and those guys are really getting a lot done. And he also plays tennis and has run 2 marathons. And I'm assuming that means that they were finished marathons. Is that true, Steve?
That is correct, yes.
All right, excellent. Congratulations on that. Okay, we'll jump right in here and just take a second. So, Steve, what is your primary strategy you're implementing to make money in real estate right now?
Well, so I started out doing some small residential buy and holds, and found that I couldn't really scale it because of my work schedule and that kind of thing. So I kind of stumbled upon private real estate syndications, and that's that, as you know, syndication is just pooling of money together, and someone will put the deal together, buy a large, well, it doesn't have to be large, but a commercial property of some sort, and then ask for people to invest with them. So I decided that this was a much easier way to utilize my money in real estate investing, and certainly better for my lifestyle and my work schedule. So with these syndications, typically they'll be anywhere from about a 3 to about 7 year hold. Some can be certainly longer. So I've been doing it for about 4 years now, and in multiple deals at this moment. I've done invested in things like multifamily, of course, self-storage. I haven't done any mobile home parks, but I'm actively looking for some good syndications on that. I've invested in some underperforming resort properties, some agriculture plays, and there's one of my most recent ones was the a 3 foot by 3 foot a play called the ATM. So you can actually invest in ATMs across the whole platform and cash flow that way. And my most interesting one is probably the Broadway show that I've invested, which actually did pretty well up until COVID hit.
Wow, that's pretty unique. I don't know that I know any Broadway show investors. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Steve, what role has networking played in your investing career?
Well, on the more macro level, sites like Bigger Pockets is a great avenue for networking, and I was able to find some of my early turnkey providers when I was doing single family homes and such. And also, I found local flippers like John Horner on Bigger Pockets, and so I would meet up with them after seeing them on the forums and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, in the local real estate meetings, I did not really find too many people who were interested in syndications until I met Jim Pfeiffer, and we had a nice talk one evening. I did go to some national syndication meetings to learn more about syndications, and that was certainly a great way to network with people. And as you guys know, Jim, myself and some other coin members started the Left Field Investor Group, which has now become more of a national and sort of international group. We have a website, a podcast where Jim's doing just a great job hosting that. We have monthly meetings with guest speakers, and we also have like a networking session afterwards for us to talk about our deals. And within our website, we have what's called an infield group, which is the paid portion where we're able to talk about syndicators and deals and all different topics about passive investing in our forum.
Awesome. Yeah, Left Field Investors. Again, if you haven't checked that out, scroll on over there and check it out for sure. Steve, if you could tell yourself, what would you tell yourself 2 years ago? If you could tell yourself anything, what would it be?
Not a whole lot's changed in 2 years, except it's a lot easier to learn more about syndications with the number of syndicators that are out there. But I would, tell myself to try to find more of these syndicators so I can have a little more variety. Well, back then, have more variety of where to invest in. Probably if you go back 10 years ago, I would tell myself to learn more about syndications versus what I was doing, which I wouldn't say it was a failure, but I mean, I just didn't really enjoy the whole process of trying to find homes and renting them out and that kind of thing. So I would definitely tell myself that, get into syndications investing.
Do you see overall the same types of returns through your syndications that you were seeing when you were in the smaller units?
Um, well, I would say that because most of the syndications are doing cost segregation, which I was not doing with my single family homes. Um, I'm getting more tax benefits for sure from that, and so all my gains are, of course, passive. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have the same situation with your single family homes and that kind of thing. But with the bonus depreciation, we can get 89% of our money, passive losses on our investment. So that's really nice. And but from a return standpoint, actually, it's fairly similar. Although my problem with the one single family home I had in Cincinnati was a Section 8, and um, one tenant pretty much destroyed the place, and so I spent a lot of money fixing it up, and so all the gains from the last couple of years were gone. Hopefully, we don't see that kind of thing with 100-unit apartments and that kind of thing. So so I actually still have one college duplex in Oxford that I still have, and that's actually cash flowing pretty well. I'll get about a 15% return on that annually, or sometimes more. From a syndication standpoint, now usually the cash flow is not as high. It may be anywhere from 4 to 6, 7% annually, but you also are betting that these, because they're forcing a lot of appreciation into these, because I do invest in mainly value add properties, hopefully on the back end we'll get a overall IRR of around 20% or more.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking a little time to share it with the group. And really cool to hear about how you've moved on out of the smaller units. So thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. All right, well, we're going to roll into our main presentation here. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Mark, and I'm going to remind everyone, it looks like you're muted, but just keep muted during this presentation. If you have some questions, just throw them in the chat box, and Mark can field them there. And I'll let you take it over there, Mark.
Well, good to see everybody again. We got a little small group. I guess the appraiser friend or fro didn't really have a big impact on people, or maybe just everyone's happy with the appraisals that they get. Now, we have a great speaker here, good friend of mine. I've done business with him. He's, I don't know, probably going on about 15 years now. I don't know exactly when we started doing business together, but it's been a while. And he works as himself, Burley Appraising, Matt Burley. He's got he wanted to point himself out and gave himself a nice little green, screen to his picture. He didn't want to hide from anybody. But one of the great things I can say about Matt is he's my guy. He's my go-to that I will call and say, hey, I need some input. And everybody has go-tos for different parts of the industry. And he's mine. He's my first point of contact and telling me, hey, Mark, you're wrong about this. And we'll argue about things all the time. But I always appreciate his insight. Before we get into some questions and stuff, though, I did want to give a little more background about him. Matt, actually, before he was ever an appraiser, he used to be a professional baseball player. He was also a really great athlete, had the opportunity to play football as well, too. But he decided the baseball route, did that for a while, and then decided, heck, I want to have a family. And right now he's married, he has 3 kids. So he's doing that thing, lives up in the Sunbury area, and he's an outdoorsman, does a lot of hunting and fishing. So he's really just one of us most of the time. Everyone knows a guy who likes to go out and do some hanging out and do some family stuff. So that's kind of the thing about appraisers and everybody else is we just think they're out to get us all the time, but that's not the case at all. But it's probably one of those things, as long as everything goes good, we love them. It's when something doesn't go good, we think that they're terrible or something. That's not the case. I mean, I just had a deal today that I got in that came in $75,000 short. And you would think, oh, that's a big problem. You want to know what the problem was? That appraisal was spot on. The problem was, I think the agent oversold it a little bit. But this was down in Texas too, so they always screw everything up. But let's kind of jump into it though. Make sure, Matt, you have your mute off.
Yeah, and Mark, I'm going to jump in there real quick. I know it's tedious, but if you guys don't mind kind of muting back and forth when you're not talking, we are getting a little bit of feedback. So
Will do. I'll do mine. All right. So first question, I always want to start off with something easy. We're always watching HGTV and these realtor shows, and my favorite one is like out in Los Angeles. Well, the price per square foot is this. And I have this conversation with agents all the time. Well, the price per square foot is this. And I'm always telling them, no, that's not really active. But, give us a professional opinion of what is that price per square foot and how does that really work?
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right? All right. Well, thanks for having me, Mark. I really appreciate it. The sales price per square footage, that's a huge real estate term with agents. In the appraisal industry, though, it can only work in one or two situations. That's when you have two houses that are identical in every single way you can imagine, like a condo. You sell, your buddy's got a condo right here. He sells it for $100,000, 1,000 square foot condo. It's $100 a square foot. Well, when you get into a 1,000 square foot ranch home on 5 acres and it sells for $100,000, and right next door is a 1,000 square foot ranch on an acre, and it doesn't have a basement, it doesn't have a garage. There's so many variables that go into that appraisers can't use it. That's it. That's just something that I've always been telling people. Is you got to be careful with that because you got to make sure everything's the same. Now, if you get that 1,000 square foot house and you subtract how much the lot difference is, how much the basement difference is, how much the garage difference is, then you can get into a realistic price per square footage.
Okay. That's kind of what I've always thought too. And I'm always trying to explain it because I'm always looking at appraisals and I see that grid sheet. A lot of people on this call probably have seen an appraisal at some time and seen that grid sheet. Can you explain a little bit about how that grid comparison sheet works?
Sure. Once again, like I just said, it's very hard to find houses that are very similar, identical. So that grid is made so we can extract the differences between one comparable to the subject. So there's all sorts of stuff between lot size, square footage, basement size, garage size, lot size. Everything goes into a account there. So the grid is where we can separate the plus or minus of the comparables to the subject.
Now, here's another one I always get a lot of times, especially when I'm doing working with some realtors who are more on the commercial or investment side, multifamily kind of things, but they might venture into residential. And just so everyone knows, residential is basically 4 units or less. If you go above 4 units, you're automatically commercial. But if you've ever seen on their appraisal sheet before, there's actually 3 different types of approaches. There's the cost approach, the income approach, and the comparison approach. But typically what I'm always dealing with is comparison approach. But kind of explain a little bit what's the difference between those approaches and what industries use which.
Sure. I can tell you right now that I'm 97 to 99% sales comparison in the residential field. Even an income producing property like a multi-unit, a duplex, relies a lot on the sales comparison approach. Now, income approach obviously is used in taking weight into those properties. It's with the banks, it's almost like a side note. A lot of investors use it to make their decisions, but the banks just really don't put much weight on it. Sometimes we can put a little weight on it if there's limited sales. You have to go back in time to find some comparable sales. The income approach can get some weight. The thing about the cost approach is it really only works on a new construction. if you think about it. Depreciation is so different no matter where you go. I know a lot of people probably aren't from around the Columbus area, or maybe they are. German Village is huge. When people ask me to complete a cost approach in German Village, it's a nightmare. First off, because it's really hard to extrapolate the cost of the lot itself, because there hasn't been any lot sales in German Village in 50 years. And the depreciation of something that's 1900, 1940 built is huge. So try to get a 900 square foot house that was built in 1900 and sells for 500,000. Good luck on the cost approach with that per square footage.
Here's one, I mean, doing a lot, I always try to hear about some different things that, you know, us as the underwriting side, so I'm kind of flipping the other side of what I do, is on sometimes underwriters don't like to see some things on appraisals. So I'm going to have a two-parter here. One, what are some of the things you're seeing that you're getting kickbacks from the underwriting side? Because, you know, sometimes you're being told to do something that maybe you don't really agree with, but you have to on the lending side. So it's not you being the bad guy. It's sometimes the lender or the underwriting. But then also hard boundaries, you know, in terms of like, how do those things affect, you know, could be rivers, could be highways, any kind of thing like that. So kind of talk a little bit about the hard boundaries and how that does or doesn't come into play for appraisals.
Well, first off, Mark, good question. Every underwriter, just like every appraiser, is a little different. I've been doing this for quite a while, and it feels like I get very little questions nowadays. It's almost like I know what certain lenders want, what kind of writing they want in there. So I don't get too much feedback from that. Any feedback I get is usually maybe a spelling mistake. I forgot a middle initial in someone's name or something like that. But one of the things that, and it's, I know in Central Ohio, especially in this market we're in, that being in a PUD, which is a planned unit development, is really not a huge factor to most of the buyers. It might be in California, it might be in Texas, it might be somewhere. I don't know where, but it's not here. But some of the lenders and underwriters really want me to dive into the PUD, the amenities, the HOAs, and it's hard to find. It's very hard to find. That's not typically public knowledge. Realtors do a pretty good job of putting down some of the amenities, but we have another problem here in Central Ohio. If you go under Columbus zoning, PUD is actually a zoning classification. And as soon as I put PUD in that zoning classification, it throws up red flags, red lights to these underwriters and asks me why I didn't market PUD. Well, you know, to be a PUD, typically you have a homeowners association and homeowners fees. Well, there's houses built in 1975 that are located in those, are zoned PUD, that are no longer have an HOA, no longer have a fee. So it's really, by all definitions, not a PUD anymore. So that's just something that I have to deal with every once in a while. It's not much, it's not bad. But on your second thing, hard boundaries. For example, I can think of two really big hard boundaries that are in it. Like you said, those are things you don't want to cross to find comparables. Parsons Avenue is a huge hard boundary, and because Parsons is so commercialized down it, it kind of shows a separation. The other one is South Gould Avenue. It separates Bexley and Whitehall. Now, what makes that really hard is you can have sales on the east side of the street selling for $100,000, and the sales on the west side of the same street selling for $400,000. So you could turn in an appraisal on a house on Gold Avenue with three comparables all on the same street and be totally wrong. You have to know those things. Those are the hard boundaries you got to be careful with. Now, appraisers have a little bit of leeway when it comes to that if you have a very unique property. Now that's something that, say down in, I don't know, you got a house that's a lot bigger than most, it's got a larger lot, so you can expand out a little farther to try to find something that you would consider similar.
Let's get into some other stuff here. I have this question a lot from customers because they're getting their house purchased, and it's not happening as much right now because the home prices are just going up so fast and so high, and they're not, a lot of times they're not appraising out. But let's just back it up a couple of years and kind of remember what it was like every time you go to buy a house, and all of a sudden the house appraises for exactly the same amount as the purchase price. How in the hell does that happen?
Well, that's a good question, Mark. Here's the deal. Market value, and you might be asking this later, market value is the most probable price a house will sell for in an open market with multiple buyers, okay? Competing buyers. Now, that market value can be a range. All right, very few times I appraise houses where I have all my comparables come in at 220, 220, 221. It might be 210, then 220, then, could be, every house has a range of values. Well, if you consider a house that has been on the market and competing with multiple views, multiple offers, that I'm probably going to regret saying this, but a contract price can be a market value. So when you have your comparable range at 210 and 220 and the sale price is 215, I'm definitely not going to come in at 210. So if I have a range there, that contract price can show a fair market value.
So then that kind of leads into today. You know where this is going. To today, when buyers are willing to spend X more dollars, how are you trying to negotiate that in terms of what your job is and what you're really doing? And I'm going to lead you with a little feedback. Who are you working for?
That is, I always tell people, even though there's a buyer, there's a seller, there's a buyer's agent, a seller's agent, there's a mortgage broker, there's one person in that's the bank. That is my client. I try to make those 5, 6 people happy, but sometimes it doesn't work. My client is the bank. So that being said, they're the ones lending the money. They're the ones that say yes or no. They're the ones I have to answer to. Does that answer your question?
That at least helps kind of put it together, because what I'm always trying to explain to people is that the goal of the appraiser is not to tell the customer whether or not they're buying it for the right price. They're not. That's not the goal of all for you, if I'm corrected. The goal is you're supposed to be letting the lender who've never really seen it, and really, like when I'm doing a loan, you're working for Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or something like that. And then is the buyer being crazy, or are you following, and basically you're following the rules that they have established for you to follow? So I'll give you a chance to kind of maybe expand a little on that.
Well, you're right. You're right. My number one job is to be the eyes and ears for the bank, but I also have a obligation to protect people from themselves sometimes. You have someone who lives out in California where the prices are extraordinarily crazy. $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 for a 900 square foot house. They up and move to Columbus, Ohio, and they come and see this market, and they see a house, and they offer an ungodly amount on it. You can pay that if you want, but I'm telling the bank and you what most people are paying for this house.
How do you handle just these types of situations I mean, is there a way to adjust? And I've had this done one time, but is there a way to adjust for the increase in markets? Because what I see is that the market's almost fluctuating every 3 to 6 months easily in terms of like, it used to be here, now it's here, now it's here. And it's going so fast. Is there a way to account for these huge market increases and how fast they're going in an appraisal?
Well, I don't know if any of you ever heard of USPAP. That is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraiser Practice, okay? That is our rules and regulations. That's where the cost approach, the income approach, and the sales comparison approach come from. Those are our 3 approaches to value that they want us to use. I've been asking this for 25 years. How does anything appreciate if all 3 approaches are back in time? So that makes it very difficult to do things like this. The things that help out a lot right now in this time we're in is a cash buyer. The cash buyer doesn't need to get a loan. So if they want to pay that amount for the house, that raises the prices in that area. The other thing right now I'm finding that's helping out a bunch is the appraisal clause. You know, we have 10 houses sell for $220,000 within the last 3 or 4 months. The realtor lists the house for $220,000, but there's nothing else to, the inventory's low. There's nothing else to compete with it. Well, you got 10 buyers coming in and throwing all sorts of money at it. Well, they come in contract at $240,000, $245,000, 20 to 25 grand over what they were asking. But there's an appraiser clause in there that says they'll pay 15, 20 grand over appraised value. That's helping the market because now that house just sold for $240,000. So that's increasing a little bit. That's a little less stress on us because if we don't have that constantly going back in time, we're handcuffed. We're handcuffed by the rules and regulations that we have to abide by.
Okay. And that's always a big key point that I'm always hearing is like, if someone's willing to pay for it, then isn't it worth that? But it's like you said, you're handcuffed. You have to follow the rules that were given, which is show me the comparables, give me the evidence. And you know, there's future evidence, and then there's evidence today. And that's kind of what I've always seen. I did get a question. I do want to hit on it real quick. And this is probably maybe more for me because this has nothing to do with you, Matt. It says if the client is the bank, why does the buyer pay for the appraisal? Okay. Well, the credit report's for the bank. The customer pays for the credit report. The underwriting's for the bank. You have an underwriting fee. It's just part of doing business like with any other transaction. So that's kind of the reason. It's just part of those costs that do it. They could turn around and pay, the lender could pay for it, but then they just find a different way to play the cost in somewhere else. But that's just a quick answer to that one. Sorry if it's not good enough. Here's a question that, because we have a lot of sales in Columbus that do not get listed on the MLS. You know, they're wholesale deals. They're, you know, just never get there. Can those be used as comparables? Why and why not?
Yes, they can if you do your due diligence into research into what type of sale it was. You can always get on the county auditor and see who sold to who. Now, just doing that doesn't help out sometimes because you can't tell if John Doe is related to Jim Smith. And they could be father and son. But to be able to make sure that it's an arm's length transaction, with the help of other data fields like Zillow and things like that, because the problem with a non-MLS sale most of the time is I don't know what it looks like on the inside. There's no data to show, but Zillow sometimes will have it. So like I said, sometimes. Most of the time, appraisers don't because they don't know exactly what's going on there with it. It could have been a relative sale. It could have been, you know, mom selling it to her son and giving her a $80,000 gift of equity or something like that. You know, not knowing what condition it is on the inside that we get from MLS is one of the main reasons why we don't use them all the time, if at all.
Yeah, I just had that recently where I wanted to use some comps that were not on MLS. But then my problem was is I had no pictures of the inside to really help kind of determine what it was like. I was able to kind of figure out it was an arm's length transaction, at least assume, but I couldn't figure out the rest of that. So we didn't get to use them. Here's something I always get a lot too.
Hold on a second, Mark. But an appraiser has to be an investigator sometimes. If you call me up and say, hey, I found a sale, it was a non-MLS sale, I got to do my due diligence. I got to find a third party. You know, I can call up. There's nothing in the USPAP or appraisal law that says I can't go knock on a door. I can go knock up on the door of that house and say, hey, I'm a real estate appraiser. I'm doing an appraiser down here. You bought this, boom, boom, boom. Give them all the information. Show them that you know what you're talking about. Hand them a card. Ask them. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that's tough. That's tough to get somebody to spill that information first off, and it's also tough, you know, for appraisers to just go out knocking on doors. Go ahead.
That's why you're my favorite appraiser, because you'll do that. Not every time, though. I actually try to do that due diligence for you. So here's something I get a lot in this condition, and everyone's seen condition adjustments and stuff, but try to explain the difference between like, hey, I just put in a new AC unit. Is my house worth more money? I just got my roof redone. Is my house worth more money? I put in brand new appliances, but this other property has, you know, commercial grade appliances. How do those things balance out in appraisal values?
Well, like I said earlier, every house has a range of values. There's certain things that we can extrapolate. That means you're not supposed to just pull an adjustment out of your hat. You have to prove it. Okay. The things like you got one condo sells for 100, another condo sells for 104. One's got granite, one doesn't. That's called, you know, a $4,000 adjustment right there. That's how we're supposed to find adjustments. But I don't know if you've noticed or some of you other noticed when you're looking at appraisers, sometimes there's a lot of zeros on there. There's just no way to find out if there is a market reaction to that. But there's a range of values. There's a real low end and there's a high end. Every little thing that you do can start pushing that up. I'm not going to be able to make a $10,000 adjustment because someone put in a brand new furnace and AC. I don't know if there's a market reaction to that, but I do know that that's going to start, a buyer is going to be willing to pay a little more in that range for those items. There's certain items that just don't matter also in this market. Grandview Heights, not Grandview Heights, I'm sorry, Clintonville is huge. I have a 1,500 square foot two-story house and another 1,500 square foot two-story house. This one sold for $330,000. It's got granite, brand new kitchen, brand new bathrooms. This house to the left of it has nothing. That it's sold for $330,000 also. It's just people just want in houses. It's getting to the point where you got to be able to find the adjustment before you can make it.
Okay. Someone just added a little comment. What about electrical? Does that kind of fall in the same line?
It does. It goes under maintenance, I guess you should say. Once again, you have two houses that are right side by side, and they're both for sale. A buyer comes in, and you say this electric's here is 30 years old. You go to the next door, this one was just updated. They're obviously going to put an offer in on that one. So even though they might eventually sell for the same thing, you're going to sell that one a lot quicker.
All right. Wanted to kind of, you know, everyone's seen those adjustments, and you have, you know, the prices per homes, and then you have all these adjustments, and then you have this thing at the bottom called the adjusted value. And that kind of goes in with what you're talking about, this range. Because this is going to lead into our next phase, like what can people do to help that valuation? Because I know a lot of times you have this range of adjusted values of these comparables, and then the appraiser will pick where in that range they think that value is. Explain, I always like to say that's the art of being an appraiser. Everything else is above is like the science. This is the art part. or just a little bit more opinion? Kind of explain that process a little bit.
Sure. That's, obviously we can put in 100 comparables if we want, but that grid has room for 3. We can add another one on there, but that 3 helps because we can, if in a perfect world, all 3 of my comparables are identical to the subject property, and I've got 3 values. So that range, can be quite large sometimes, but what I try to do is compare it to the most similar of the comparables, because that's one thing MLS has is interior photos. So I can look at a house and go, wow, that's very similar to this house. This is nowhere near that house. So I can make adjustments for certain things like that. It's just trying to find that perfect comp is what appraisers usually are trying to do. You have to put 3 on, because typically what the bank wants. It's hard to find 3 really, really good ones. But if you can find that one, that helps out a ton.
All right, so let's try to get into what can people do to help themselves. Now, I'm always trying to look at, hey, what do I think this house would appraise for? If it's a refinance, we're trying to get cash out or whatever, I'm trying to get the very highest value possible. I'm doing all kinds of things to tell my customers, this is what I want you to do to be ready for that appointment. I don't want to tell you what I tell them, but I have a list of things that I prepare. But then even on home sales, I'm talking to people all the time, and one of my biggest pet peeves is the house is listed for sale. It's got stage, it looks amazing, and then all of a sudden the appraisal comes back and the pictures come back. I'm like, what happened to the house that they were buying? So shed some light on what kind of mistakes are you seeing people make out there that maybe they could help themselves, because I know those things can make a difference.
They can. 20 years ago, the picture I put on an appraisal was the front photo. That was it. Nowadays, the banks and mortgage my clients, they want photos of every room. So, the saying, pictures say 1,000 words. I go take a picture of a bedroom and all you see is one wall because there's piled with clutter. It's hard to tell the bank that this is a prime property, when they're looking at those photos. So cleanliness helps out a ton. What's really coming into effect because of the interest rates we're dealing with now, I'm getting a huge refinance boom. We had the same thing back in 2012, 2013. But prior to that, all my appraisals were purchases. It's just bunches and bunches of purchases. I could see what was going on with that house before I went out because the realtors listed all those photos. And you're right, they were staged. A good appraiser should walk in there and look through those boxes and look through that clutter, okay? You try to do that with refinances because I'm not appraising your stuff in the house. I'm appraising the house itself. But when there's so much stuff in there that you can't see if there's a big hole in the wall behind it, you can't see what kind of condition the carpets are, you got to make some assumptions that sometimes don't help the homeowners out. So having the cleanliness helps out a bunch. Maintaining your house really helps out. Doing the little things, you see one thing, and I need to probably do it too because I'm looking right now, is your return air vents. If you don't clean those every once in a while, it just builds up and builds up and builds up. You walk into people's houses and you see little things like that you don't take care of. It hurts, especially in the photos you're taking.
Any other kind of tips that, maybe people aren't thinking about that they should be doing, or things that they are doing that are hurting themselves? So it can go the other way.
Well, like I said earlier, there's always a range of values to a house. So doing the maintenance, the due diligence on your maintenance is always going to help out because everything has a economic life. If you do more maintenance on your furnace, it's going to last longer than if you don't. So what will hurt you in the long run is not doing that maintenance and taking care of it. You know, it's different kinds of siding you may have to maintain, but to be able to increase your value of your home, you have to do the major things, though. Sometimes it's the bathrooms, the kitchens, you know, those big things like roofs and you know, furnace and air, they cost a ton, but they just don't show that. You remodel that kitchen and get it up to date, the bathrooms and get them up to date, changes that whole complexion of that house. The one that does hurt really bad, and it hurts really bad right now because of construction costs, are the home additions. People are putting a lot of money in home additions. I just did one the other day. Guy added 10 foot by 30 foot in his back of his house. It's costing him $200,000. 10 foot by 30 foot. There were, I mean, and it was a $270,000 house. Well, he's putting 200 into it. The highest sale in the neighborhood was 330. So that's what you got to be careful with right there, is those additions that you think are going to add a bunch. You got to look around you. Over improvement's something I hate to say. People don't want to hear it, but it's true.
Okay. How about pets? It's a big pet peeve of mine, but you tell me, pets, should they be at the appointment or not?
Depends on what's going on. Carpet can be ripped out and things can be mediated, but I try to appraise the house and not what I smell sometimes. Now, there are certain odors that you do smell that you do have to report. Gas, you know, things like that. Pet odors, I'm not an expert in pets and how long that could last. I have 5 cats, but they all live outside. But I walked into a house the other day, walked in the first floor, beautiful house, new wood floors, new this, new kitchen, new granite. I walk upstairs, in the loft, there's 3 litter boxes, and it hit me like a ton of brick. It's just, I try to look past it because I know it can be fixed, but if you list that property as a realtor, you're going to take care of that. So I try to look past it.
Before you still guess, so if anyone has any last questions, I'm going to be on my last question right here. So if you do have any, make sure you put it in the chat box. I'll make sure I'll get to it here. But here's a last one. What can someone do if they think their appraisal is bad or undervalued? What are their options? And I mean, I guess I could speak to what their options are, but I guess more importantly is, how should somebody do it the right way? Because a lot of times you have people calling and yelling and screaming, but what is the right way to approach if you think that your house was undervalued?
Great question. I get this a lot. I do not, and no one likes to get a call with someone yelling at them. You know, that's not the best way to do it. I know a few appraisers that's happened to, and they just shut down. Obviously, calling up your mortgage broker is a great first step. They typically know what they need to do, a reconsideration of value. Now, when that's sent to me, I look at them all. I take that because knowledge is information is knowledge. The more data I have, the better. So if I missed a comparable sale, I missed something, I want to see it. The problem 99.9% of the time is the reconsiderations of values I get and the additional information which comes in the house next door, which is not comparable whatsoever to the subject property. You know, I've ranch house and, oh, my neighbor sold for $300,000. What's a 3,000 square foot 2-story? You know, it's, if you can show me something very similar to your house that sold for a little more, that has something that I might have missed, I will definitely take into consideration of that. That's just more information, and appraisers are able to. I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, but they are, with more information, allowed to reconsider their value. Now, that's about it. You know, do it through the right channels. Calling me up and screaming and yelling at me is not one of the best ways to do it, but I can handle it. Have handled it. I'm like, hey, show me, because the thing that I don't want to say, it calms people a little more when I say, hey, this is what I have. This is very identical to your house. This. This all sold for this. Can you show me, say you have a bi-level house. Show me a bi-level house that's sold for what you think it's worth. If they find it, good, because I know they probably won't.
All right, so I did get another question. I want you to kind of answer this in two ways. One, your opinion, but also try to think, what do you think the opinion is overall for the appraisal community? Which that might be a little hard one on this one. But do you want or not want people to give you comps? So this could be on a refinance, a borrower, the owner of the home giving you a list of, hey, these are the comparables that I think are like mine, or maybe a listing agent or something like that, or even a seller.
My opinion is I'll take the most information I can. I'll take as much data as you can provide me, because sometimes I just didn't see it. Sometimes I'm skimming through all these houses and I'm using the most recent sales, and there might have been one 9 months ago that's just perfect. Just didn't come up, but I'm provided that I can throw it in there. Overall, like you said, I don't want to speak too much about it. We're people, we're humans, just like you guys. We're all different. Some feel that you might be telling them how to do their job, but I take it. I have friends of mine saying, hey, I'm getting a refinance. Do you think you can pull some comparables up? And I was like, yeah. So I print them out, hand them to him. He gives them to the appraiser. Yeah. If the appraiser does his job correct, he's not going to let anybody influence his opinion about it.
All right, right on. Well, I think that's about it. I think I've gone probably a little bit over time, so I apologize about that to anybody. But Matt, thank you very much. Always appreciate time with you. Like I said, and if a little shout out, some other things, because I know most of us, the appraisals are getting ordered through the lender, so you really don't have any control of that whatsoever. But there are some other options out there, or times out there, and you might need an appraiser, and it might be, for just your own personal knowledge, or if you're getting home value jumped up a lot and you think it's too much on from the county, you can contact any appraiser that you want to get a value and appraisal. And that's a great way to go to the county and say, hey, here's an appraiser that just said my house is worth that. I know I did that with Matt on one of my properties, and I got my value down in a more reasonable amount and saved me a lot on taxes. And I guarantee you one thing, Matt is the fastest appraiser in Columbus. Nobody gets it.
Now that you said that, I'm going to get about 900 people calling me to get a fast appraiser. No, but what's funny about that, I do tax dispute appraisals, okay? And here recently, with the trimester coming up where they reassessed everything, there's a lot of values out there that are pretty high. But what's funny is I go from hearing people think that their house is their castle and tell me everything great about it, to all of a sudden tell me everything that's wrong about it when it comes to those things. It's totally different flip-flop there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mark. Go ahead.
So you're saying we're fickle as human beings. Now, thanks, Matt. Always appreciate it. If anybody ever has, you can find Matt Burley Appraising. You can probably Google him. If you ever have any problems, you can't locate him, just let me know. I'll get you to him. Throw it back to you, Nate.
Awesome. That was great, Matt. Thank you so much. That's like, for those of us that trade in houses, it's like getting to look under the hood a little bit, because we're always waiting for that appraisal to come in. So that was pretty awesome. Well, hey, we're wrapping it up here. So thanks to everyone for joining. Thanks again to Matt. Thanks again to Steve for sharing a little bit about himself. Again, April 20th next month, we'll be with Chris Stanley. And then pretty soon here with the vaccines rolling out, hopefully we'll all be back in the room together very shortly. So thanks for joining us online, and everybody have a great night. We'll see you.
Bye.